if you don't mind, please.
Yes, ma'am, I'll be happy to. I make a motion to approve the amended agenda.
I'll second. This is Rhea.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve today's amended agenda and the minutes for today's meeting.
Okay, I'll do the roll call this time. When I call your name, if you unmute yourself and say yes or no. Margot Howard.
Yes.
Thank you. Tammy O'Lanning.
Yes.
Thank you. Melissa Lee.
The only thing I'd like to say is that last meeting I went and introduced the Wake County Indian Education Program, being the president, that the Wake County Public School System recognizes the Native or the American Indian Heritage Month and the Indigenous Peoples Day. So that wasn't on the minutes of last time. So just want to make sure on that part. Hello?
Thank you, Ms. Melissa, for that feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Frank Cooper.
Yes.
Rhea Jacobs.
Yes.
Angela Richardson.
Yes.
Thank you. Will Paul. Well, you made the motion, but let me affirm your vote again.
Yes.
Ms. Dorothy Yates.
Yes.
And Dr. LaRonda Lowry.
Yes.
Thank you. Your motion carries, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Our first item on the agenda is for a state superintendent, and I don't think she has joined us yet. So as we're waiting for her to join, I will say that a proposal was presented to the 2021 Unity Conference on behalf of SACE. I would like to thank Ms. Dorothy Crow for that reminder to submit a proposal. And the SACE proposal was accepted, and a virtual presentation has been submitted on behalf of SACE. And that presentation concerns our SACE report. It looks like our superintendent has joined us. Today, our North Carolina State Superintendent Catherine Troit joins SACE. It is with the warmest welcomes that SACE welcomes you, Superintendent Troit. We also congratulate you and appreciate you joining us. Superintendent will share North Carolina DPI updates. Welcome indeed.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. I had a little trouble connecting to audio, so glad everything's good.
Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. So I'm really excited to be here right now. I wish we were all in person, but it is a really exciting time to come into this role. There's a lot going on, excuse me, right now. And just to give you a little bit of a taste of what we're doing here right now, we are getting ready to announce our legislative and budgetary asks to the General Assembly, and we are will be presenting first those asks to the State Board of Education at our regularly scheduled meeting next week. And they will reflect budgetary priorities that are in line with the state board's 3 goals. And so from my own sort of personal goals for the coming year, this session and then even the short session that will follow really come under the umbrella of my North Star. And my North Star is that every single child in North Carolina must have a high quality, excellent teacher in every single classroom. And really, in order to do that, we have a human capital problem that we need to solve for. And so we will be working to support districts in solving for those challenges. What can we do differently to attract teachers to understaffed or hard to staff areas of our state, as well as hard to staff subjects like secondary science and math and special ed. The other priority that we are all, everyone on my team and the state board has actually done the legwork for this last summer, is we have to solve our literacy problem. Right now in North Carolina, 67% of 8th graders do not read or do math proficiently when they start high school. And that is 67% too many. And so we will be embarking on a statewide literacy campaign along with the UNC system, the governor's office, the State Board of Education, philanthropy, and our districts to ensure that every single teacher is trained in initially every single pre-K through 5 teacher is trained in the body of research known as the science of reading, which is, if I were to explain it simply, it would just be a phonics-based approach to early literacy instruction. Our literacy proficiency rates in North Carolina have been stagnant for over 30 years. And what the research tells us is that we've not been training our teachers to use research-backed methods of early literacy instruction. So this is going to be a very important endeavor. The school to prison pipeline, everyone, is paved with bricks of illiteracy. And all of the other work that we want to do, refine and perfect for our students, is really all for naught if students can't read. They have got to be able to read and, in this economy, be proficient in math. So, the third area, so I've talked about human capital and the need to ensure that we have excellent and highly qualified teachers in every classroom, the need to retrain our teachers and update our education prep programs in science of reading. And the third thing that I'm really going to be focused on is redesigning our school accountability, testing and accountability model. And that starts with policy changes to the way we calculate a school's letter grade. And so right now we have this A through F system that takes a metric of 80% achievement and 20% growth, and it comes up with a letter grade. That is not the way we should be evaluating our schools. We should evaluate our schools in multiple ways, including parent satisfaction surveys, teacher satisfaction surveys, student satisfaction surveys. We should be weighting growth more than proficiency. Proficiency is important to measure, but you know, as an educator, I want to know to what extent is this school growing children. And I don't think that a letter grade is the way to communicate the quality of the school. I think we should have a star rating system for each of the different measures. It should be something that a parent can pull up and immediately look at and know what kind of school their child attends and all of the different things that they're doing to meet the needs of the children in that school. So I will stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions in our remaining time.
Ms. Truitt, this is Rodney Jackson from Cumberland County Schools.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. I have two questions for you.
Yeah.
Teacher recruitment. How can we recruit new teachers when we're taking their benefits away from them? And then my second question is, how are we going to hold parents accountable after 3 o'clock? The students aren't with the teachers anymore, they're with that parent. So how are we going to hold parents accountable to improve reading skills?
So the first question about benefits. So I will tell you that most young people are not thinking about retiree benefits. They're not, when we talk about recruiting teachers from college, or we even, you know, we really need to be digging down into high school to try and get people excited about going into the profession. They're not thinking about, I'm going to do this job for 20 years. They're thinking about the next 5 years. And so there is no other job outside of the military and state government that provide retiree health care benefits for the way our state system does for those who've been grandfathered into this system. We have one of the top 5 most strong teacher pension funds in the country. Some would say the best, the strongest and most solvent. And so, but even saying to a teacher, even saying to a 22-year-old, if you become a teacher, you can retire at age 55 with a full pension. That's the research is very clear that that's not what is drawing them to one profession or another. And so we need to be creative in the way that we attract new teachers. And what I would say is that if we had we actually are working on a new licensure system that shows young people how they can grow and in the profession without having to leave the classroom to go into administration, and that their pay will be tied to this growth. So rather than tying it to, necessarily to a bonus for how your kids do on a test, it's tied to the way you lead, the other things, the professional growth that you undergo as a teacher, etc. So I would say that we need to be doing things like loan forgiveness in our more rural areas. The Warren County has they're right now rehabbing apartments in their little downtown Main Street so that new teachers will have a place to live for free, which I think is just an amazing creative solution to one creative solution to that challenge. The other question about reading is we can't control what parents do. There are examples of specific principals who have been able to increase parent engagement by turning their school into a community center of sorts, and making it a safe place for parents. But what we need to do is focus on what we can do during the school day, and that means maximizing instructional time to ensure that students are learning how to read, and training teachers properly, and making sure that they have all of the tools that they need. We need to do a better job with professional development for teachers, and that is going to be at the center of the state boards and agencies' request to the legislature. Other questions?
Thank you, Superintendent. This is Chairwoman Locklear. We are definitely excited about the Deputy of Equity position, as that aligns with the work that we're doing here with Stacey. Can you tell us your vision for that position, or the vision of DPI?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a dual report in Dr. Bev Emery, who reports both to the state board and to the agency, who will be in charge of ensuring that the court's mandates in Leandro are being filled. And she will also work to, we are going to reinvigorate the district and school transformation division at the department. And Catherine Edmonds, who will report to me on the agency side, there are many things about equity in our schools that don't have to do necessarily with funding, which is what the Leandro decision is about. And I'll give you an example. We have a lot of districts right now. Well, we have a handful, a very small handful of districts that offer CTE credentials for high school students in IT. And a high school graduate could take, if they had about 3 IT credentials, and certifications, they would be able to actually get an entry-level job in certain types of IT with those credentials. But that's a very small number of districts, and they are our wealthier districts who are able to offer that. The majority of our districts are not offering those kinds of certifications, and a good number of them are offering career technical education certifications in something like first aid, which is not a career pathway. And so this has to do with the extent to which a district can get people to teach these courses. Do they know, are they aware that that the credentials that they're offering are not aligned to employer need in our state or a career path? And so all of those issues of equity and also with exceptional children and those types of equity that are not necessarily tied to funding, those are the kinds of things that Catherine and her soon-to-be team will be working on. And Catherine joins us next week, and we're so excited for her to share her vision of this new office.
Thank you for that response. I'm looking in the chat box. I think we have a few questions in the chat box relating to teacher pay and master's pay for teachers. And at one time, retired teachers were allowed to return to the workforce without being penalized. Is this something to begin to look at with teacher shortage?
So that would be a legislative, my guess is that that's in statute someplace, and would need to be revisited with the House and the Senate. I'm happy to look into that and find out what's going on there. I know that state employees have to wait 6 months after they retire in order to return. But I'm not sure what the current regulations are for teachers.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions that I missed?
Hi, I have a quick question. This is Cameo. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. My question is regarding the social studies standards that the State Board of Education had a conversation on, and I know Dr. Oxendine is planning on speaking on that later, but I wanted to know what your opinion is or how you feel about the social studies standards changing in relation to the historical grief and trauma of the American Indians within the state of North Carolina and how that will impact the Native students within the state.
So my understanding of how these events have transpired is that there was a what's called draft 3. The third draft of the standards were presented to the board in June, and they were recommended at a rate of 85% approval and by stakeholders. And one or two board members spoke up and said the standards don't go deep enough into issues of systemic racism, discrimination, and gender identity. And so between July and January, which was my first board meeting after being sworn in on January 2nd, a draft 4 was presented, and those standards, or I might be confusing my 3 and 4, but the new set of standards that were going to be presented that were presented at the January meeting had written in the standards and in the objectives, when talking about discrimination, identity, and racism, they were very specific in saying gender identity, systemic racism, and systemic discrimination. And so feedback from board members at that January meeting was that this is those words are too explicit, and that there needs to be more balance. And so the agency then came back last week with a 5th draft that specified that in the standards and the objectives, it removed the terms systemic in front of the words racism and discrimination, and it eliminated the word gender. And that was because there are many types of racism, there are many types of discrimination, and there are many types of identity. And so the glossary defines those various types of discrimination, various types of racism, like interpersonal, personalized, systemic, institutional, and then it recognizes that there are many types of identity, including gender identity, regional identity, ethnic identity, etc. The standards in their current form do not specify what events would be included. It's the standards are not the standards are not the curriculum, and so the standards do not say students shall learn about the Trail of Tears, or students shall learn about this event or that event. That will be forthcoming in the supporting documents, which will be, according to state board policy, developed over the course of 1 year's time, subsequent to the standards being adopted. And so it is, as the leader of the Department of Public Instruction, it is my job to ensure that these supplemental documents are inclusive of multiple perspectives, include the teaching of competing historical narratives, and are balanced in that they do not represent one political viewpoint over another. But at the end of the day, a district will adopt whatever curriculum it chooses. And so that is where the role of the local school board comes into play. And so Wake County may adopt a history curriculum or a social studies or a geography curriculum that is very different than Scotland County. And those are local decisions. I hope my response was helpful.
Yes, ma'am, I appreciate it. I'm Cameo Lanning. I'm the parent representative from the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. So I just had that quick question, but I appreciate your answer and thank you so much.
Absolutely. You have a beautiful first name. I did see a question pop up that said, will this group be a part of that conversation? The supplemental documents are devised internally, according to policy, are devised internally at DPI, but they will be available for, they will be shared with the state board regularly, which of course are public meetings, and anyone can weigh in on the development of those documents. And I'm happy to set up a, come to your meeting and share progress specifically with you all if that's something you would like.
Thank you, Superintendent Troy. Thank you for joining us today. We want to be respectful of your time. We appreciate your commitment and we appreciate you joining Stacey this morning. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you all for your work, and I look forward to continued relationship with Stacey. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a great day.
You all as well.
Following, we have with us Mr. Greg Richardson, Executive Director for the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs, with updates from the department. Good morning, Mr. Richardson. You're on, you're still muted.
Okay.
Thank you.
How is that? Am I coming through?
Yes, yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Good morning.
Right. Good morning. How's everyone? I just wanted to say, first of all, to you, Dr. Locklear, thank you for your service and what you're doing with the State Advisory Council on Indian Education. And secondly, I want to commend the members of SACE for the awesome work that you do. You know that your work is on the cutting edge of Indian education out here across the state of North Carolina. And we're often dealt with challenges that we have to address, and you all are certainly meeting those challenges. I'm pleased to see that you have Superintendent Truitt on your agenda today, and I was listening to her presentation. I don't know if she's still in the meeting, but I'm so pleased to see that she took time out of her busy schedule to be a part of this meeting today, your first meeting of the new year. So that's very important to have the top leader within DPI to be a part of this meeting to hear some of your issues. And I see that right away that the SACA members are taking the lead in terms of facilitating questions that really need to be asked. And I'm so pleased that you have questions popping up in the chat room about pay, about equity, and those kind of things, because those are some very, very key issues that a lot of us in North Carolina are concerned about, but primarily we're concerned because our students are impacted with that. So, you know, we've all have to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic starting back in last year, and the pandemic and the issues around the pandemic has dominated the work of this Commission of Indian Affairs starting in March of last year. Some of the things that we've had to drill down and find our way on about, because we're not scientists and we're certainly not key people that are involved on the cutting edge of figuring out what has to be done in terms of making sure that the American Indian population in the state, their needs are being addressed. So with that said, we have worked very closely with the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services and been a key player in terms of some work stream groups since March of last year, trying to figure out really how, number one, the American Indian communities are impacted with COVID-19. Number two, how services are being aligned with our population. And number three, whether or not we have people that are being consulted with in terms of our tribal communities in relation to the pandemic. So what we found early on is that when the contact tracing started, we found that in May and June, there were only 2 American Indians employed as contact tracers in the state of North Carolina, that there were no supervisory employees in policy level making positions that dealt with contact tracing. And so we went to work on that. Within a short time frame, we were able to get American Indians employed in different regions of the state. And at the last count, we had upward of 25 American Indians who were employed across the state in tribal communities to look at contact tracing. So now we're focusing on vaccines and how that process is rolling out into the American Indian communities. The first cut on that work revealed that there were very little emphasis being placed on the American Indian communities. And so we were challenged with trying to figure out how we could make sure that American Indians had a voice and were included in the work of in the process of making sure that the vaccines are going to be brought out to rural American Indian communities. So as a result of that type of work, the same thing kind of applied with the testing, and we are now seeing actual events being taken or held rather in American Indian communities, whereas testing is occurring. In the Lumpy, I saw a process through which there was about 2,000 people tested. In Eastern Band of Cherokee, I saw word that a good number of the Cherokee tribal members have been tested and they're already getting their vaccines. At Hiawassee Pony, was a personal participant in the testing up there, where 244 American Indians were tested on a Saturday between 9 and 3 p.m. And out of that group, 34 people in the community came back positive. And fortunately, I was one of those tested, and I came back negative. But I was so pleased to see that testing has actually is actually being performed in our American Indian communities. And you all know that Ms. Dorothy Yates is chair of our Indian Education Committee at the Commission of Indian Affairs. This is one of our most active committees at the Commission, and Dorothy holds regular meetings each quarter, and they're addressing key issues such as the ones that I've mentioned, Also, I wanted to give a highlight to Rodney Jackson over in Cumberland County for his work last fall with Indian Heritage Month to make sure that the programming and events down there. And so these are all things that are very, very important. So COVID-19 has dominated our work and is continuing to dominate our work. We are striving to make sure that our community needs are addressed. And earlier on last year, we received over 25,000 masks from the Federal Veteran Administration, and we've distributed those masks across communities, and we continue to accept donations, and we continue to distribute PPEs across the state. Just within the last 2 weeks, we've received a huge shipment, so we're constantly, as staff, go out into the communities. What we're trying to do is get those on out into the communities as they perform their work. Of course, that has been hampered because of the process that we're having to work with in terms of COVID-19. We are required now to telework, and so there's very few options where we're able to get out into the communities, but we're doing that as we can, and we're going to continue to do that. Moving to the year's agenda for our commission meetings. Our next meeting will be held March 11th. That's going to be a virtual meeting. All of our meetings will continue to be held virtually until the pandemic situation is calmed down. June 4th, September the 3rd, and December the 3rd. The March 11th meeting will be held in conjunction with the North Carolina Indian Unity Conference. And the Indian Unity Conference, because of the COVID situation, will also be held virtually. And that date, the dates for the Indian Unity Conference is March 11th and 12th. And information relating to the Indian Unity Conference is housed on the United Tribes of North Carolina website. So you can go to that website and go and see what activities are going to be planned for the 2021 Indian Unity Conference. Workshop proposals are still being accepted. So if SACE or other educators would like to submit a proposal, you can do that by going to the website and submitting a proposal. The deadline has passed on that, but I would still encourage you to, if you have some thoughts about a proposal or a work session, please go ahead and do that, because things are running behind because of the COVID situation. They will be virtual again, and we're calling them workshops, but it's going to be pretty much a virtual discussion about subject matter. So if you have some things that you would like to present during the Indian Unity Conference, please feel free to do that. The other thing we worked on a lot in 2020 was the 2020 census. So a great deal of our time actually coming out of 2019, we were giving that a high priority because it's so important to make sure that American Indians are counted, properly enumerated in our communities, because that data drives the funding for Indian education and all that we do and all that we know. So we felt very good about that work. We have not seen any numbers yet or projections in terms of what the data is going to look like for the 2021 census, but we're very hopeful that we did get a strong turnout, because the worst case scenario could be a low census count, and then that would impact our funding for Indian education and other programs. You all know that we have 8 tribes in North Carolina, and I always like to highlight that because we have new people coming on board, like our new superintendent, and so we want to always make sure that there's a good understanding among our leadership about the population of American Indians in North Carolina. Based on the 2010 census, we had a net of 122,000 American Indians if you use the Indian alone totals in North Carolina. And if you use the numbers in terms of in combination with other populations, our data goes up to 180 plus thousand in our state. So depending on how you're using that information, it's very important to pay attention to that data, because arguments can be made for programs and services in many ways using data and strategies wrapped around around data. As you know, SACE and the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs has done some work in the past about relating to the mascot issue. And in 2020, the mascot issue came up strong again. We have two school systems in the state right now where the local communities are having discussion with the public school system about their mascots. And I'm not going to go into detail because of time right now, but I just wanted to mention that the mascot issue is still out there to a degree. And I always like to mention when that come up and I get correspondence or requests for information or inquiries that our public schools are governed locally. And while we can listen and while we're going to hear complaints from American Indian communities and our leaders, but the bottom line is that the management of what type of policies are going to be in place for our public schools, that is all governed locally. So we have to be mindful of that. And in the past, we've had some great successes in terms of the elimination of mascots. And I think those successes can be attributed to the fact that we had some people working in diplomatic ways with local school leaders and emphasizing and discussing the importance of knowing that mascots is a kind of a hot topic among American Indians, and American Indians are not mascots. So we don't want our students to have to be faced with hearing that we are mascots and have funny things said about us. You know, I've mentioned many times as a student in middle school many years ago, so I'm telling my age now, but that's all right. But I remember being teased, and I remember the impact of that words can have when you're young, and these are some of the things that will live with you forever. And so one of the commitments that I made when I decided to take this job, that if we heard from students or parents or the community that there are issues out there where American Indian students are being teased and made little of, then we need to pay attention to that and do as best we can to educate leaders about the importance of that not happening. And also to work towards building policies or putting policies in place that can prevent those kind of things from happening. So finally, I wanted to say a couple of things of encouragement that I know Dorothy Yates is aware of because we talked about it in our in our June commission meeting and our September commission meeting. We know that your former chair of SACE is now the vice chair or president of the National Indian Education Association. Sorry, and so she's advocating that our tribes and our other Indian educators become a member of NIEA. The membership fees are not the basic membership fees are not very expensive. So in my executive director's report in the last two meetings, we've encouraged all of our tribes to become a member of the National American Indian Education Association, because that's important in terms of North Carolina having a voice at the National Indian Education table. So I want to encourage you all to think about perhaps SACE could even become a member of the of NIEA. And you can also become a personal member. I've signed up, and the Commission of Indian Affairs is a member of the NIEA. And so we have 17 Indian education programs in our state, I believe, last count. And so just think of how important and strong it would be if we had all of our 17 Indian Ed directors to be a member of NIEA and to perhaps attend at least the annual meeting. That's another that's kind of a little bit more of expense because the meetings are held usually or you know, in the Midwest or in some other states. So you have travel and other things, but the basic level for NIA membership is $80. And, you know, $80 is a lot of money, but $80 is not, you know, going to break anybody, I don't think. There's a professional level of $150 and a premium level of $200. And then, you know, organizations, when there's a category of organizations, and this kind of gets on into the money from $2,500 to $25,000. Well, the Indian Commission certainly can't afford that, but we could certainly afford the basic level, and we did join in 2020, and we're going to continue being a member of NIA because we want to have that voice at the national level. So thank you so much, Dr. Locklear, for allowing me to have some time today to have an exchange and discussion during your meeting. I want to invite you perhaps to attend our upcoming commission meeting on March 11th. If you have time, we'd like to, we always like to hear from Stacey. We always like to hear about your report. It's good information for the tribal leaders and our commission members to know and learn. So that's important to us. And so we want to continue that process. So thank you again. And if you have any questions, I'll be standing by and be happy to answer questions if you have any at this time. Thank you very much.
Mr. Gray, this is Rodney Jackson.
Yes.
I want to just take a moment to say thank you to you and Ms. Dorothy Yates for being a part of our virtual video Native American Month. And back in November, we purposely had you to kick the month off for us for the very first video. And then Ms. Dorothy Yates was another one that was a part of the video also. So from Cumberland County Office of Indian Education, we just want to say thank you for doing that for us.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to do that and enjoyed that. Hopefully in 2021, we can start programming now, and we can have multiple presentations going in November. I think that would be important. I'm not saying that I need to be part of that, but there are a lot of other voices out here in the Indian education arena and in our Indian leadership arenas that can contribute to a very vital conversation like that. So thank you again, Rodney.
Mr. Richardson, thank you for those important updates and offering that specific data. The intentional focus on the Indian population during the pandemic is certainly vital. And also allow me to extend congratulations to Dr. Connie Locklear on her new appointment with the National Indian Education Association. And I'd also like to let you know, Dr. Richardson, we did submit a proposal to the 2021 Unity Conference on behalf of Stacey. Ms. Dorothy Crowe sent us that reminder, and our proposal was accepted, and we'll present the Stacey report.
Great, super, very important. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you for your time and your advocacy for the Indian population in North Carolina.
Thank you all too for what you do. It's very important and very necessary.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, we did amend the agenda. I think Dr. Oxendine is going to join us later. So we have moved up Dr. Briggs. Dr. Briggs is going to provide an update on the Stacey culturally responsive teaching modules about American Indians.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, okay, great. So I'm going to go over and switch over to from the agenda just to sort of remind everyone sort of what started this off. So you guys definitely went in and were able to, I think, look at the module information and then submitted some recommendations. And we were lucky enough to get access to that course, which now really makes updating the course and adding to it very simple. So all of these recommendations or suggestions for revision have been made. And we we also have access now to this very last part. So I know, Dr. Locklear, you had talked about, maybe some next steps would be to add a survey for the participants so that you could get continuous and ongoing feedback about the sessions. And currently there actually is a survey. However, the bad news about that is we don't have access to the data. So there's been a lot of transition in DPI, and I've sent out some emails to folks to see if we could get access to that. But I think one of the best things is, instead of using that one, we now have the capability to create our own. So I think you guys, if you wish, could create a survey, which then could be either done through the Google platform or Microsoft. And it would then be uploaded, because we have edit rights now, and the information would then populate for us to be able to share out, so that, recommendations for how to improve or what maybe to add to it can be a continuous process. And I wanted to go ahead and take you into the course as well. Are you guys seeing the screen still?
Yes, we are. We can see the screen.
Okay. Perfect. So I wanted to go ahead and sort of take you into the course and show you where the survey is down here at the bottom. And actually, I can share the survey with you guys if you want me to drop it into the chat box, and you can sort of see what's already there. Again, the unfortunate part is that participants already have to do the survey. Like, they have to take it in order to get access to their certificate showing their CEUs for completion, but we don't have access to the data. So since we now have the access to edit, we can add our own surveys. So we can remove this one and add our own, where then we can have continuous access to that survey information. And would you guys like me to go ahead and drop this into the chat? Would you like to see this?
Yes. Yes, please share the survey with us.
Okay. And also, so when you go to this AC course now as an instructor, I'm able to see the total number of participants. So currently, right now, there's 718 active participants within the course. About 5% of those participants have been active within the last 6 months. So it gives you a little bit of information. But again, what I think would be more important, and what you guys really want to have also, would be that feedback. And right now, currently, there is a survey that they have to complete prior to getting CEUs, but we can't see the feedback.
And this is Dr. Silver. I'll share one other thing while you all are processing. The other work that Dr. Briggs did for us was go through, and all of the links, some of which are embedded within the module and some that are on the website, she went through and checked every link, and those that were broken, she either removed or found the updated version of it. If there were things that were dated, which some were, we tried to find an updated version of that. So both on the website and within this, we've tried to go through and make sure broken links were removed or updated.
Thank you, Dr. Briggs, for your commitment to updating those modules. So you're saying that, thank you for sharing that Google link with us as well. So you're saying that we can actually remove the link that's in there now and add our own, right? So that we can have continuous access?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, absolutely. We have now edit rights, and we can add additional modules. So basically, we have control of that content and that information within the module itself. And thankfully, the survey is already linked. It's already it's already something that they have to complete prior to getting their CEU certificate.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So you really just need to edit that link so that feedback comes to us, comes to Stacey.
Yes, that is correct. Like, and also, you know, if you guys decide after sort of viewing what the survey is asking, if you want to ask different questions, this is a great time to, you know, sort of cater it to exactly what you would like feedback on as well. And so, yeah, and then we will get that information because we will have created the survey. So we can continuously view the feedback.
Okay. Thank you. I know somebody, Mr. Jacobs, typed in the chat that there are 2 questions on the form that are the same. So we'll definitely take a look at that survey and make some decisions and let you know.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Yeah, I'm excited about that, Dr. Briggs. Making those future edits will definitely be easier for us.
Absolutely. I am very excited about it as well because it is very simple. So, you know, in the format that you gave me and everything to make those edits was easy breezy, copy and pasting it in there and that's just hitting submit. So yes, it worked perfectly.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for your commitment to that. All right. Next on our agenda is Dr. Maynard, and I think she is with us. Awesome. So Dr. Maynard is the co-director of Region 6 Comprehensive Serve Center, and she is going to discuss the National Education Center's pilot update. Thank you, Dr. Maynard, for joining us today.
Hello, how are you? How's everyone?
We are well. How are you?
Doing great, doing great. So let me bring this up. Can everyone see my screen?
We can.
Perfect. Okay. And Kelly, if you can kind of man the chat and just let me know if there are any questions that may come up. But anyway, thank you again for the second invitation back. I think I was with you in September when we were about to launch a part of the Native Education Collaborative's work as part of the National Center. North Carolina was one of the pilots along with the state of Washington, the state of Oklahoma, and the state of Idaho. So we have completed, for the most part, all of the circles in terms of the circles of reflection process. So I'm here to kind of follow up and give you an update on where things are in the next step. So feel free to chime in with any questions in the chat, and I'll try my best to respond. Just to kind of let you know about who some of the participants were, obviously, the national project was all about helping state education agencies build their capacity to better support and strengthen Native education programs. So there was a select group of leaders from the department that participated in the 3 circles process, and which began in October through, well, actually November, finishing up this month in January. So as you can see, there's the leadership from federal programs, from the department, from accountability and regional support services, as well as curriculum and instruction, and effective teachers and leaders, along with a couple of the regional case managers that were in Region 3 and 4, as well as Dr. Stegall and Beverly Emery, who are the deputy state superintendents, and then Olivia Oxnine, state board Indian education liaison. As a part of the regional center located at SERVE, we're part of representing Region 6 and we provide support to North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. So that's out of the Serve Center in Greensboro. George Hancock is the co-director along with myself for that center and that work. And one of our associates is Aaron Goodman. So the regional center was basically participating as observers to the process, since we are supporting work in several projects in North Carolina. Other participants from the State Advisory Council on Indian Ed are all listed. And because we were trying to get a representation of tribal representation, university representation, plus schools, you have several folks from the tribal community and the university that participated in the circles process, as well as Title VI coordinators and Yona Wade from the Cherokee Central Tribal School, because the department has several memorandums of understanding with the tribal school that's on the boundary. Those with a star by their name are the individuals that participated in both the second circle as well as the third circle. So what does all that mean in terms of the circles of reflection? When I say first circle, second circle, and third circle, it was just that. It was a process that, as I shared in September, is we brought together a group of Native education researchers, scholars, and experts in Indian education from across the country, who provided input into what the key areas of focus should be in terms of categories of support for Native education that public schools and state education agencies should work to strengthen. So the circles of reflection process and the product and the outcomes was, the first circle was really a facilitation of the state level folks only, where we talked and discussed and captured their knowledge about their efforts within the department and their supports to LEAs in Native education, along those 3 or 6 categories that were identified. The second circle was about reviewing those state reflections with the tribal education representatives, and really promoted dialogue and just a shared understanding that was great in North Carolina, because we had significant tribal education participation. So I think the feedback from the SEA was that they learned quite a bit about activities that were happening at the local level with the school districts, but also efforts and initiatives through other federal grants from the tribes that the tribes have, as well as the university. The third circle was bringing back the state education folks to really reflect on all of the data that was collected in the first circle and the second circle, to begin talking about a plan, a development of a plan around some identified outcomes and priorities. So we referred to that as mapping the path forward. So first circle was seeing from the inside out, which was the self-reflective process of the SEA leadership. Then widening the circle was bringing in tribal representation in education to provide feedback, and then collectively coming together in the third circle to map a path forward. So what mapping the path forward was to really identify short-term goals, or a short-term goal and a longer-term, more ambitious goal, with a short-term being 3 to 12 months and the long-term being 1 to 3 years. And then the 90-day action plan was, well, okay, if we've identified this is our short-term goal and our long-term goal, what are the steps within the next 90 days to begin executing on those goals. Will can the SEA commit to in moving that plan that's moving their plan and mapping it out for action? Another part of the national pilot is a collection of best practices, lots of white papers that have been written by scholars in the various areas that is being collected from across the nation. So in the chat, I added a link to that. I won't go into that, but as you can see, there's a number of resources that you could kind of peruse. There are some highlights for some of the things that North Carolina is doing, particularly around SACE's report. Is indicated as an exemplar example for others across the other states across the nation. What we have learned is that North Carolina, particularly in the area of data collection on the academic performance and other indicators for Native students, is really one of the leaders in the nation, especially in terms of how we're reporting that data and presenting that data in a formalized way. So, what was the summary information, which was probably not going to be much of a surprise to many of you. First of all, let's go back and review the 6 categories of state support. As I said, these were identified from all of the interviews and data collected from Native education experts from across the nation. So there were 6 areas of focus that came out in terms of areas that state education agencies should focus when they're building and creating stronger supports for Native education in their states. Effective teachers and leaders, Native culture and language, and tribal consultation and sovereignty were the 3 that were determined as a part of the North Carolina pilot in the Circles process. They bubbled up to the top in terms of areas that North Carolina could focus on. Now, we know that all 6 are critically important, and that was very much articulated by our tribal education leaders. But to begin in terms of looking at it, of where can we have the greatest impact, these 3 were determined the top priorities. So what does that mean in terms of what does that look like? As you can see, when the indicators for effective teachers and leaders, I'm not going to read through each of these, and I can definitely provide the slide deck to Kelly and Susan to share with you. But the indicators were around, supporting the recruitment of Native students to serve as future teachers and school administrators, very much aligned to University of North Carolina at Pembroke. They do have a national or a federal grant that is targeting and providing the supports to prepare Native teachers and future leaders. The focus too around teacher and school leader preparation programs, especially around prospective educators and their knowledge around Native culture and history. I was very interested in listening and hearing and learning about the modules that Kelly just shared, because that really falls in line with some of those key things that bubbled up as needs, not only in North Carolina, but nationally in strengthening Native education programs. And of course, there's community, family and community structures and being able to, increase understanding of Native students within that context of their culture, and then alternative pathways for certification in terms of honoring this knowledge. As you're already aware, there are some pathways in terms of certifications to support Cherokee language teachers in the western, in the western part of the state. So, and if you over to the side on these charts as well, it's really some of the ratings and where they, where the ratings ultimately ended up being. Okay. And feel free, if there are any questions that you have, let me know. The second priority was around the native language and culture, and listed are the topics. But in green are those that elevated to the top in terms of areas to concentrate on. Definitely around policies and programs and practices in terms of the inclusion of Native history and culture, as well as the inclusion of tribal, language instruction, and effective practices for culturally responsive and cultural-based teaching and assessments. The third suggested priority was around tribal consultation and sovereignty, and I know that Stacey has been very instrumental in educating and trying to educate the state as well as local districts in terms of the requirements of ESSA in tribal consultation and coordination. So no surprise that those two areas, 1 and 3, surface at the top in this category for North Carolina's SEA or NCDPI to focus. Now I'll share with you the other categories and the indicators that fall under them, because they're just as they are just as important. College and career readiness being one of those, and you can see those indicators. When discussion about, well, is this a priority? Yes, it is a priority, but is it an impactful priority? Yes, it is an impactful priority. But in the conversation of the circles, there was a part of that process was really identifying and getting really getting a feel and a better understanding for what things were in place and where there may be, some gaps. College and career readiness and access has been a focus, particularly a lot around some of the tribe and the tribal work in improving access and opportunities to STEM education and those types of things. NCNAO has a heavy focus in this. UNC Chapel Hill as well as UNC Pembroke have programs that bring Native students from across the state to do in coordinating school visitations and those types of things. So in terms of, the state's role, obviously just being aware of that and being partners and supporting those efforts and making sure some of the work that's done within the department aligns to those things. But in terms of impact and where the state can actually begin their focus was in the other areas. Physical and behavioral health topic was probably the one that would have been fourth, because you can see that there were 3s, particularly in indicators 2, 3, and 4. And with this particular piece, the state education agency is doing or has some programs and is working on a statewide level to address some of these needs. So as a part of that process, obviously there was recommendation to make sure that there was consideration given to the effects of trauma on Native students, particularly in those Native, not only around the historical and intergenerational trauma, but in some of the Native communities in our state, there, such as public schools of Robeson County, who have been hit by hurricanes and just with COVID and just a remote, it's just been, back to back, year to year kinds of trauma. So taking into account those types of things as well as the state develops their programs and their supports with LEAs around addressing the physical and behavioral health of students. Then lastly, there was promising programs and practices. And And here, yes, it is important to identify where are there some promising programs and practices going around, not only in North Carolina, but across the nation that possibly could be replicated and supported. So that too is another area that wasn't a top priority for immediate focus, but was an area that the state was recommended to make sure that they take into account in terms of their work. So in kind of taking all of the data, which was a lot of data that was collected from the interviews, in the discussions with the state and with the tribal education leaders, it was the idea was posed of, well, how does this, the key findings from this process, how does that align to some of the recommendations that SACE has brought forward over the past few years to the state, to the state board? So what we did do was an analysis of at least 3 years of reports to determine and do a crosswalk of, and excuse me, I'm going to just hello.
We're still here, Dr. Maynard. We can hear you.
Okay, so is the second screen showing with the SACE results?
Right now, we can see a table with the seats.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
So, so what we did is, as I said, we kind of took the past 3 years of reports and divided, looked and did an analysis of all of the recommendations in relation to the 6 categories. So as you can see, and this document too, Dr. Silver can share with you because she has a copy of this. But as you can see, there were recommendations that aligned from SACE to the State Board of Education that aligned to the categories that were identified from the national project. Okay. All right. I'm going to now pause again. Okay. So, what ultimately became the short-term goal? So the short-term goal was for the SEA to conduct a policy and programs opportunities analysis to identify the program, policy, and or legislative implications that should be addressed to create a stronger, equitable system of support for the Native students and for strengthening, Native education. So what would that look like, and what does that mean? And I'm not sure if Dr. Oxendine has joined, and she and Susan definitely can kind of elaborate in terms of the thinking here. But through the course of the discussion, one of the things that really surfaced from the SEA teams, particularly in the federal programs and accountability, and in with those regional case managers, were immediate ideas and thoughts on, how they currently execute on their work, and the processes that they have. Or if you could think about it in terms of standard operating procedures, in terms of how they manage their work, and were there opportunities, what the opportunities were to make adjustments. So particularly in the federal programs director, she noted several things that she felt that as her team carried out their work, particularly in Title I and some of the other title programs, there were some things that they could do differently that would, or incorporate into their processes that would be more attentive to and more intentional in thinking about the American Indian students and the districts and the supports for those districts that are serving those students. So some of the similar things came up from, discussions around accountability, with the, test development and assessment development and those processes, curriculum development and those processes and so forth. So through an analysis of such within each of the regions, or with each of the divisions, those types of things could bubble up, and those are things that the agency and the directors could do just within their divisions. So capturing those opportunities and leaving it up to the directors to determine how they can rethink their work, to be more intentional around Native American students and Native education would be, really a short-term kind of fix. Other things that could come up too would be, really an analysis of some of the key programs that the state, is a part of rolling out. Typically, the state just rolls, may think about it or roll out through their partnerships, various state initiatives. And one that was mentioned was an effort called NC Teach. That is a collaboration with some other external partners that the department has. That is primarily focused on the recruitment and retention of high quality teachers. So that would be an example of a programmatic or a program area or initiative that the state may have in place or planning for rollout, that there again, they could look at the program perspectives in terms of the aspects of addressing Native education. Policy and legislative, obviously there may be some things that come up that may be outside of the purview of the state education agency per se, that may require state board policy changes or state board policy recommendations, and or it could be some things that may have some type of legislative implications. All in all, it would be more of a landscape analysis to really determine where some gaps are, where some needs are, and what the opportunities are. And from there, it could pose, an agenda for state board policy, an agenda for legislative and or further research, as well as addressing those, operational practices or program practices within the department. And in terms of a long-term goal, and this one would not be no surprise, I think this has been one of the recommendations, at least during my tenure as at the department as well, and working with SACE, is the key finding was there were significant gaps across the agency in terms of communication and coordination at all levels. Within the department, the department to the LEA, within the regions, and two, in coordinating with all of the districts and Title VI, Title VI programs, and then the communication disconnects from communications coming from the federal level, from the Office of Indian Education, where are those being routed. And then the whole category around tribal consultation. So that led to a long-term goal of really being intentional about exploring what it would take to secure a dedicated SEA position to manage and coordinate the educational projects that are designed to improve the scope and quality of not only state but also the local education programs, so that they can ensure equitable access programs and supports for Native students. And obviously, I don't have to tell you, that's preaching to the choir. This position is critical on multiple levels if it's going to be, successful in terms of meeting the ESRA requirements for effective consultation across North Carolina in the Indian communities. And that is all, Dr. Locklear. Just wanted to kind of just open it up for any final reflections and comments from Dr. Oxendine and Dr. Silver, as well as some of the SAC members and those that are in attendance here today that, participated in the process. To just open the floor for that.
Dr. Locklear, this is Susan again. I'll start and then would love to hear some of the participants who participated in Circle 2 share. Participating in this pilot, for number one, it was great that North Carolina was given that opportunity. Just some behind the scenes. North Carolina is unique compared to some of the other states, so I am encouraged that from the national level they wanted to make sure that a state like ours was included. And it was very interesting to be able to have a sit down with the leadership in the agency to see their thoughts around or how they thought about American Indians when they processed their everyday work. And while it wasn't surprising that we are not always front of mind, it was very reassuring to hear some of them say, I never thought about it like that, or I see real opportunities to link our work back. So I think some inroads have been made, and I think it's a timely opportunity because we are at a crossroads with a new superintendent and a new Office of Equity. And it's time for the annual report, which we didn't have data for, so hopefully some of this 90-day plan, maybe you'll see some crosses there where you could think about that in your recommendations this afternoon. So I'll stop there and would love to hear from some of the other participants who to share your feedback with Priscilla as well. I'm sure Dr. Maynard would be glad to hear that because as she shared, this is a pilot. So if you're thinking about other things as this is carried forward, some suggestions, I'm sure she'd be happy to hear that as well.
Thank you, Susan. I didn't see, you said Dr. Oxendine is not on.
This is Dorothy Yates. I just wanted to say that it was very reassuring to me to sit through some of these discussions and see the overlap where we had had some of these previous discussions within our own SAC as an advisory council. And as we prepare the report and look at our recommendations, some of the things that had really been important to us as a council also came up being very important to continuing the work that we need to do for our American Indian students. So I found it very validating, as well as hearing some new perspectives that I may not have thought about. So I'm just glad that I had the opportunity to participate. And I think this is going to make an impact for our American Indian students. And one thing that I wanted to say to our superintendent when she was talking about the equity position is that I feel the need so strongly for us to have that American Indian person that's working there with DPI and the Board of Education on behalf of our American Indian students. You know, we had that position a long time ago, and I think would just put more emphasis on our American Indian students and their needs and what we need to be doing presently for them. But I was glad of the opportunity to share and to be able just to hear the reflections and the comments from all of the members that participated in the collaborative.
Thank you, Ms. Yates. Okay, if there's no one else. Again, I'd just like to thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to come and share the pilot. It was really exciting to have North Carolina represented in this national work, and I just look forward to continuing to support SACE, but also continuing to support DPI. I served as there were 3 capacity leads that have been leading this national project. So I served as a National Center capacity lead for the work, and now finishing that up. But I still will remain, at least for the next 4 years, a co-director for the Region 6 Comprehensive Center. And I can say on behalf of the Region 6 Center, we have had our conversations with, Dr. Stegall as well as Dr. Emery, in that, if this is an area that the agency feels is a priority to focus on, in helping the state education to build this capacity to strengthen Native education and their supports to districts and schools, that the regional center can come in and kind of help support them in those efforts. So the contacts then for this pilot project work, obviously, Dr. Stegall was the primary point of contact, and then Dr. Silver and Dr. Oxendine representing you and the department and the state and the state board. So with that being said, Dr. Locklear, I am done.
Dr. Maynard, could you send me this particular PowerPoint? I think they might be interested in referring back to it when discussing their recommendations.
I sure can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Maynard, for your dedication and this extensive plan to support our American Indian students. It's definitely needed, especially during this time of teaching and learning. And as you, SACE is proud of the SACE report and the culturally responsive modules. So that's awesome. Your time today is certainly valued, and we look forward to future collaborations with you. Thank you indeed.
Thank you.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I said it's my pleasure, actually, as all of you, most of you know me. It's been definitely this part for a number of years of my work has been my passion. So
awesome. Thank you. It's certainly appreciated. So right now we are about 10 minutes behind on the agenda. Does everyone agree to maybe break for 5 minutes rather than 10? Is that okay with everyone?
That's fine with me.
That's fine with me too.
Okay. Okay, we'll break for 5 minutes and return at 11:15.
Sounds good. And Dr. Carlin is with us, so she'll be up next.
Thank you.
I'm happy to share my screen, but I also shared the presentation with Kelly.
Okay, Kelly will let you know which one she'd like to do.
Dr. Carlin, that is really completely up to you. Do you want to be able to control your slides? If so, then you can share away. That would be fine.
Sure,
Okay.
not a problem at all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So, Miss Susan, we are bathroom breaking until 11:15.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
All right, it's 11:15, so we will reconvene. I hope everyone's back.
I'm back.
All right, can everyone just check in the chat box? That would be great. Most of us have checked in. It looks like Dr. Oxendine has joined us. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you very much. I apologize for being late. I've had some complications, but I'm here.
No problem. We hope all is well. So moving forward on our agenda, we have Dr. Lori Carlin with us, who serves as the section chief for the Social Studies and Arts Education. She's going to be speaking on the Native Voices Pilot Curriculum and Instruction Initiative. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Carlin.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. And I'm glad Dr. Oxendine is on because as I fly through this presentation, I want you all to know that it originated with her. And it is due to her advocacy that we are really, really excited to present this pilot. It is a pilot because we're hoping that based on the success of this endeavor, we're able to expand this offering throughout the state of North Carolina, but I'll talk more about that as I go through. Currently, this is a partnership between NCDPI, Robeson County Schools, and the North Carolina Arts Council. And there we go. So I'm introducing the team. We're all under the direction of Dr. Angie Mullinex and Dr. Christy Day. Angie is our director and Christy Day is the assistant director. The rest of the team as it exists right now are Brandon Roeder, who is the music and theater arts consultant. Sayward Grinley is the dance and visual arts consultant. Justin Knox is a social studies consultant, but she also spearheads our character education program. And then there's me. So that's the team. The overview of the project is, we have a mission statement here, but essentially what we're going to be doing is working through the North Carolina Teaching Arts Program and working with the North Carolina Arts Council to put together a teaching artist and a school system with a high population of Lumbee descendants. So we have contacted Union Chapel Elementary and, oh my gosh, the name just left my head, Pembroke Elementary. And they are very interested in doing this partnership with us. We will be working with probably third or fourth grade teachers to have an artist residency. I'll share a little bit more about the artist toward the end. But this is really a great opportunity to incorporate our character education tenets and the Teaching North Carolina Arts with those students. So the great news is that this project is fully funded through our character education funds at NCDPI. The Teaching North Carolina Arts project is something that has been in the works for a while. It is a partnership with the North Carolina Museum of Arts, and it's just an amazing resource that our team has developed in conjunction with what the North Carolina Museum of Art has already developed. This is what it looks like on the homepage. We have resources for dance, for music, for theater arts, and for visual art. And these are just screenshots of some of the resources that are available. So you can see on the left, we have the map of North Carolina and then all the different highlights of art-specific work. And then on the right-hand side, you see the Native Voices specific page. So I included this information so that you guys could, if you're interested, go take a look at this resource. I'm so proud of it. The team has worked very, very hard, and it is a continuing effort. So if you go to the website, you'll see that it says beta because it isn't, we're not finished with it yet. There's a lot more to do, but with a full arts ed team in our section now, I think that this is just really something we can highlight. And as you can see based on the map, as we expand this pilot and make it more of a complete effort across North Carolina, we have lots and lots of spaces that we can go to. The work coincides with the standard course of study, especially in grades 4 and 8, that in social studies are specifically geared toward North Carolina history and development and economics and so forth. And so we have geared the Teaching North Carolina Arts resources to those grades, but then there's all kinds of other resources available as well. But this is just sort of a direct tie to how we go with the standard course of study. The Arts Council is a tremendous partner in this work because they already have a rich relationship with artists and with artists who are trained to do residencies in schools. So the kind of background search, the kind of quality search, all of that is already done by the Arts Council. And so we're thrilled to have been connected with an artist of such renown. And we have reassurance in sending her into schools, knowing that she's fully vetted through the Arts Council as well. So character education, this is where this part comes in. Justin Knox, as I mentioned, spearheads our character education program at DPI, and it is a wonderful program that works with schools to help their students develop skills in character. I'm sure you've heard a lot about social and emotional learning. These things dovetail beautifully with character education and with what we're trying to do. So Justin was able to pull out 3 specific character education tenets. There are 11, but these are the 3 that we will be focusing on with the partnership. So core values, relationship skills, and intrinsic motivation. So when I said this is a developing residency, it truly, the teachers and the artists have not met together yet. So I can't speak to exactly what they're going to do, only that I believe it's going to be amazing. And these are the things we're going to focus on as we move forward with the partnership. The artist that we're going to use is Charlie Lowry. And these, I've shared this presentation, and Kelly, I'm happy for you to share it with the group. Charlie is a native of Robeson County. She went to one of the elementary schools that she's going to be working with. And people seem to be very, very excited about this partnership. She will be working with, like I said, either 3rd or 4th grade teachers to develop some kind of a residency that is focused around those character education traits. One of the pieces of the project is that we will be training Charlie in those character education traits so that as she works with the teachers to develop the program, those things are at the forefront because that is the funding source that we're using. So we want to be true to that for sure. So the timeline, in December, we had our initial conversations. We identified our partner and the schools that we were going to work with. January is quickly coming to an end, but we're hopeful that we will be able to, early in February, make the connections with transferring funds and training Charlie in character education and social and emotional learning tenets, and then start facilitating those conversations with teachers. Once we make those connections, we are going to be hands off. We are going to just enjoy seeing what an amazing collaboration happens between creative teachers and artists. So the work will take place throughout February and probably through about mid-March. March happens to be Music in Our Schools month, so we might have coincided with that beautifully. There will be a final product or performance of some kind. Of course, that is dependent on what the residency ends up looking like, but we will be able to share that on a number of sites. We're having a professional videographer record that for us so that it can be something that we keep and share and will help us promote the pilot project going forward. And then I have included all of our contact information. I was told I had just a brief period of time and I talked very quickly, so I'm happy to take any questions at this time or provide any clarification that I can.
This is Olivia, Dr. Carlin. Madam Chair.
Yes.
I want to make just a brief comment.
Sure.
I'm sitting here in my little office, not much space, and I just feel like running around this little tiny office. I'm so excited to hear about how far this project has come from the idea to the planning, the entire think tank process, and where it is today in the form of this PowerPoint presentation to Stacey. This is just, I don't have enough adjectives left to describe how, just how a kernel of an idea can come forward, and then it blossoms into something like this. As Stacey, this is one to watch. And I heard Dr. Carlin say just a few minutes ago, ever so correct, it's a pilot. And from pilots grow, more expansive initiatives. So we hope that in time, this pilot will be possible, beyond the pilot, in our LEAs and our districts where other Indian tribes exist and Indian students are in the school district. So this is just one to watch. I can't wait for it to come before the state board, and I know the state board will be just as happy and gleeful as I am. So thank you to Dr. Carlin and Dr. Molinax and Christy Day, and I'm looking at Sayward Grinley. I haven't had the opportunity to meet, and Brandon Roeder and Justin Knox. So thank you again, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. Thank you for your time today, Dr. Carlin, and thank you both, Dr. Carlin and Dr. Oxendine, for leading this specific pilot in one of our Indian communities.
It's our pleasure.
All right, next on our agenda is the 2021 SACE report recommendation development. There is a working Google document that was created and shared with all SACE members for input. The SACE report is widely disseminated across the state of North Carolina. So at this time, we can... Yes.
I'm sorry, this is where we changed our agenda. I apologize. Dr. Oxendine has popped on and she's got to pop back off. So could we have her share her update first?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine, for joining us to offer updates from the State Board of Education.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Silver, for making this accommodation in the agenda. I'm sorry that I am in and out today, but some things I can't avoid this one. So I'm going to just give you a brief update of State Board of Education, where some of the major topics that we have, on which we have focused the last, I would say, probably the last couple of months. I believe that you had some questions. Some questions have come up about the North Carolina Social Studies standards. Let me just give you kind of a broad brush, and then I will talk about some of the areas that are still in discussion. In general, not in general statute, but in State Board of Education policy under the standard course of study category, there is state board policy that requires all content areas to come up for review and revision every 5 to 7 years. And so sometimes more than one content area is on the track for revision and approval by the State Board of Education. But to my knowledge, social studies is the only content area that is on that track this cycle. So the Dr. Molinek, you saw her name just a few minutes ago, and Dr. Carlin and Dr. Day, there and others. I don't have all the names of those who work in the area of curriculum and instruction, but they their work is almost around the clock, from working with stakeholder groups and teachers to look at content standards, getting that process on track. In other words, it's cyclical. That it tends to be much of what the curriculum and instruction division does at DPI is to manage the standard course of study, the revision process, and all that goes into the revision process. And that involves bringing teachers from around the region to various locations, because the teachers play a major role in revising our standards. So that's a little bit about the process itself. The social studies is one of those areas that make up the standard course of study that is historically, that's a play on words, historically, social studies, tends to be controversial. And I'll go light on that word, not necessarily but it's always up for debate, because social studies touches so many cultures and diverse populations across North Carolina. And social studies is also about world history, American history. There's a component of social studies that known as behavioral sciences. You have your civics is also part of social studies, the founding principles. So there are 5 strands that make up the broad social studies component. So the main point of discussion right now has to do with, and we're very close. Next week is going to be the date. Next Thursday, probably the date will take place. Voting will take place on Thursday. So the controversy is, or the major discussion is, we want to, meaning the entire State Board of Education, we want to give the complete story of the American story. And we are definitely sensitive and emphatic about hearing from multiple voices, hearing multiple perspectives about my experience as American, being an American Indian, the lived experiences of African Americans, the lived experiences of Asian Americans and Hispanics, and white Caucasian. So it's very important that multiple perspectives make up the full landscape of social studies, especially in the area of history and the founding principles. So we're trying to reach a good place in these standards, because I, for one, member of the State Board of Education, is someone who's taught social studies and love teaching social studies. I will never, if I were going back in the classroom today, I would never omit the part of our history that goes into the civil rights movement, for instance, out of the 60s. That's very much a part of why we have a SACE today. I would say if it had not been for the civil rights movement, and then American Indians in North Carolina saying, hey, we've got to be part of the movement too, I dare say that we would have a state advisory council on Indian education today if it were not for those, for that period of time. So the march to equality, the march to fairness, the march to equity must always be a part of social studies. But also, I come from a perspective where I want our students in North Carolina, all students in North Carolina, to know the complete story. I want our students to know that America was oppressive at one time, but also America is a land of opportunity. And we want our American Indian students and all students to know that there has been a struggle to make the good things happen that are happening. And we need to know that America is very capable of looking at itself and putting all the warts on the table and saying this is wrong, and we're going to do whatever it takes through legislation, through activism, through community involvement, and through the legislative process to make things right. So therein lies some of the more in-depth discussion. It's about the complete, wanting a balanced and complete, and I'm not saying that it is imbalanced, the standards, but we still need to continue talking about the completeness. America the beautiful, America in the past that wasn't the beautiful, how America became more open and inclusive and sensitive to fairness. So that's, in a nutshell, that's where we are. Now, I'm very happy to say that the State Advisory Council, some of you here on this meeting today took part in a meeting that was coordinated by the department. I'm also pleased to say that steps have been made to ensure that the SACE voice is not just last minute and happenstance. So I don't know that Dr. Carlin mentioned this before her presentation today, or whether Dr. Silver has, but the SACE role in curriculum revision, standards revision in the area of social studies has been formalized now. What does that mean? That means that SACE will always have a seat at the table when it's time to revise the standards. SACE and Ms. Yates has been involved. Ms. Dorothy Yates has been involved in that process. Maybe some of the others have also taken part in the process. But the one thing that I want to underscore again is that in procedure manuals, specifically in the social studies procedures manual that guides the revision work of standards, SACE is now in black and white. You're there in print. And I hope that wherever it's appropriate in the other content areas like English language arts, science and social studies, CTE, career technical education, if there is a reason and a purpose for the voice of SACE to be involved in that standards revision process, then we need to make sure that you appear in those procedure manuals. So I'm open for questions. I see one in the chat box. There was only one black male social studies teacher who worked on the standards. You want to erase systemic racism from the standards. I'm not sure how many, I can't answer the question in terms of how many black male teachers worked on the standards. That would be a question for either for the Superintendent Truitt or maybe Dr. Carlin from social studies. I can certainly find out. The word systemic racism has posed some discussion. That doesn't mean that discussions about racism will be removed from the standards or removed from instruction or removed from the curricula that a school district chooses. I don't know how you can teach, personally, I've taught social studies. I don't know how you can teach social studies without discussing the ill effects of racism. Systemic racism became a discussion because there are those who believe that America today has made sufficient progress, especially since the 60s, especially since the passage of the 14th Amendment and the affirmative action laws that make it possible for people of color to break through ceilings, to enjoy a good life, to get good jobs, to enter any university we want to enter, that we've made enough of those changes over the last 60, 70 years that to say that America, systemic racism basically says that America is racist, and we have educators, we have citizens, we have communities, and we have people, minority people, who don't believe America is racist to the core. So that's a little bit about the discussion about the removal of the word systemic racism in where it was located in the standards. But again, I want to double down on the fact that I can't imagine a social studies teacher, if there is a social studies teacher out there in North Carolina who's teaching American history or civics and dodges the civil rights movement, which goes to the heart of eradicating racism, that teacher is just not serving students well.
Madam Chair, if I may, this is Susan, and Dr. Oxendine, if it's okay with you, to get to the point that I think is being made in the chat, I do want to share that initially in that standards review, so as you know, they'll have a group of teachers who look over standards. American Indians were not specifically targeted or included in that group. The rationale from CNI was that they do not seek out specific groups for fear of overlooking one. In committee meeting, which happens before state board meeting, I want to share that Dr. Oxendine shared that that was not appropriate and advocated that American Indians be specifically asked, specifically members of Stacy or just general American Indian educators be asked for input. Now, it was late in the game. It did not occur when it should have, thus Dr. Oxendine's comment about it being made part of the formal protocol. But on January 5th, which was the day before the January meeting when the standards came, I did work with CNI to convene some of the Stacy members and also Shannon Brayboy, who's an educator outside of Stacy, to share some feedback, some very limited feedback on some of the terminology in the standards, specifically around the terms of Indigenous versus Native American versus American Indian. And we shared with them the Commission of Indian Affairs status on that. So that just, I'm trying to get to the question that was there in the chat, and I hope that answers that. Dr. Oxendine, if you wanted to share anything about that, I just wanted them to know kind of where the conversation was at and what your role in that piece of getting some voice from Stacy was in that.
Well, that's exactly right. And to the council, I will say to you that certainly urge you to be vigilant. As a matter of fact, when it's time for Stacy to come before the state board to make your annual report, one of the things doesn't always have to be an annual recommendation, but it should be each time you are before the board, it should be something that you reiterate and that you emphasize, and you be very clear in your desire and your expectation to have a critical place at the table when it's time to revisit standards, or when anytime there is a place for you at any table within the department. So that message needs to come from, the more powerful message needs to come from you. I will always support you and do everything I can do to be there to have breakthroughs for you within the agency or with the state board. But at the same time, you've got to go before the board once a year. You know that's in general statute, and you say that as well. Susan does everything she can do to advocate, stay on top of what's going on in the building that has implications for the Stacy voice. So I guess what I'm saying is that message is going to have to come from all angles. I see the state needs to set the standards. That's coming. I need a little bit more clarification about that. I think that's coming from Ms. Howard. Miss Margot? The state, to the point, the state needs to set the standards. The state does set standards. The State Board of Education approves the standards. The standards are revised and thought about and developed under the guidance of the Department of Public Instruction, but a lot of help comes from our educators, our K-12 partners.
Well, I guess you asked for clarification. Again, this is Margot Howard from the Mahiran Indian Tribe, Eastern North Carolina. What got me on this, platform is when I heard the State Superintendent Truitt say that systematic racism needs to be removed from the standards. And I'm sitting here thinking, if we don't address this head on, it's never going to happen. We're going to just brush it on the table and have the same things that are taught or people are afraid to teach in school, because they can't teach certain things unless the state recommends it and tells the local board and what to, to teach.
Right. Well, at the classroom level, Ms. Howard, going back to my earlier point, I can't imagine that a teacher that is true to those standards can dodge the topic, the lesson plans, and the units of study around the ills of racism.
Then why do we need to dodge the word systemic racism if 85% of the people who were in that survey, included in that survey, agreed on those terms that now that board wants to change?
The social studies standards in North Carolina affect all North Carolinians, and you're going to have a segment of the population who believe, and I don't mean to say just whites. You're going to have a segment of the population made up of all colors,
right?
That believe that America is not at its core racist. You're going to have a percentage of the population that believes and has been affected by laws and hard fought efforts that have caused this country to look at its shortcomings and do better. So the social studies standards are applicable not to just one special interest group or two, but has to be broadly applied and broadly accepted by the masses. So that is one of the reasons that you have a segment who believe that no, this country is not at its core a racist country. And systemic racism implies that, it says that America is still a racist country. Now, a teacher could stand up before her class, his or her class, and have some very rich discussions about that. But at the same time, I would hope that that classroom teacher will also paint America as a country that's trying to overcome, and we have overcome. We've come a long way. I say to my students at Pembroke, I no longer have to go to a water fountain in Lumberton, North Carolina, and drink from an Indian water fountain. I no longer have to go downtown Lumberton, or anywhere in Lumberton for that matter, and be told to go to someplace else to use a restroom. So in fairness to that, those changes, we want our students to know that they live in a country that's capable of amending wrongs. I would not want an Indian child to come through the K-12 system in North Carolina and be taught that he or she lives in a racist country, because that is saying to that Indian child, you have no hope.
We're saying that the system was built on racism. And if we can't get at the core of that, then we're just whitewashing history again. I mean, our teachers can teach good and bad. Do you think the board members think teachers aren't capable of doing that?
Oh, no, we believe that our teachers are capable of doing that. But it's just one of,
But why have to play on words? Why not say systemically, North Carolina, we're talking about North Carolina, the history, what we're teaching in North Carolina, the social studies that is happening here in North Carolina. I mean, you brought up the Lumbees. They are still without monetary, they have different grants, they have their federal recognition to a certain point, but they're still suffering because of racism. You have other tribes that, you know, the other 7 tribes who are not equity is not given in the school system. I mean,
well, I know that
it's not
going to be, we're never going to have a perfect union, a perfect country. But what we can be assured of is that this country, the state of North Carolina, will always address those gaps in equity and inequality. Racism will not be eradicated in my lifetime, and probably the lifetime of this generation that follows me.
But the teachers,
what we can be proud of and have hope in is that this country will face the problem and make corrections. We have proof of that when we go back to the 1960s and look at all the legislation that much of that legislation brought to bear. The Indian Education Act, the Title I programs, 94-142, the special education laws that came out of the 70s. So systemic racism says America is racist. And that is a very, very hard statement for lots of people to accept.
Oh, I agree. I agree. But students and teachers, based on that survey that I just read, because I did my research a little bit after the state superintendent stated that certain changes. And students and teachers want the standards based off of the survey. 85% want these standards to be changed. And then politicians want to change it.
Well, the standards that you're referring to will come forward. They have been changed. They have been revised. They've been revised twice. The standards would have been adopted in July, and as a result of a lot of concerns around some of the issues that you are just making, the social studies team went back to the drawing board and made revisions in the standards. And so those revisions are the ones that will come forward next week for adoption.
And I'm just okay, I'm sorry.
Dr. Oxman, thank you. Yes. Thank you for your time today. I just want to ensure, or maybe we can create some type of assurance that SACE is always consulted on the standards moving forward. Maybe that we're part of that internalized process when there are revisions to the social studies standards moving forward, rather than feedback being provided at the 11th hour. So maybe you taking the initiative to always include SACE internally on revising those social studies standards would be great.
I'll tell you what you could do. Well, exactly. And SACE is now part of those procedure manuals that, in other words, there is a section in a procedure manual that will probably speak to all the stakeholder groups that must be involved in the revising of standards. So added to that list is the State Advisory Council on Indian Education. I think that is progress. Some may say, well, that doesn't sound like much progress, but it is progress when before 2 weeks ago, SACE was not included on that list. What I would probably suggest that you do is maybe make it a part of your official minutes today that you Stacey expects going forward to be to play an official role in all across the entire department, where Stacey can speak to the needs of American Indian students. In other words, you might want to formalize a statement. I don't have the right wording right here, but think about formalizing a statement that you would like to, that you want to put in matter of record, and I will, at the state board table, I will find a way of publicly acknowledging that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Oxendine.
Dr. Locklear?
Yes.
Hi, this is Cameo. May I make a brief comment?
Yes, you may proceed.
Thank you. Dr. Oxendine, first of all, thank you for all of your work and being a voice for us. I just wanted to I know that there has been a lot of controversy. There's been news articles and stuff like that where board members have made comments about, you know, leaving some stuff out and focusing on moving forward. And I do appreciate that because we do need to move forward. But we also need to learn from the mistakes of the past. And I think Margot is touched base on it a little bit about just making sure that we acknowledge history and the lessons that we can learn from that history, especially when it impacts the historical grief and trauma of American Indian people or any people that have been discriminated against, because they say it takes 7 generations for that historical grief and trauma to be able to move forward fully. Just for a quick example, 1979, they were still removing American Indian children from their homes. That was 1 year before I was born. I've got aunts and uncles, grandparents that grew up in boarding schools, eliminating our language, our culture, and and that there's just stuff like that that we don't want to get lost from, or lost in the mix of moving forward. So, but I just wanted to make that comment on there. And we talk about less than 100 years ago, we weren't even citizens. So and our right to vote didn't happen until 1965. So I really, that's something that, I'm sorry. But yeah, that's pretty much where I wanted to go with it. I don't have a stance on the wording or anything like that, but my final comment is there's a journal written by Reverend Daniel Bertrick that was about the Cherokee removal from May 1838 to April 1839. Mm-hmm. I still cannot read that book. Mm-hmm. 3 pages in and my heart breaks, and I don't want to lose that in the curricular guidelines of moving forward, and we need to remember. So that's
thank you for raising that. See, you're bringing up something, Cameo. Those points are very important, and those pieces of your history are really, really important. Here is where those stories need to show up in the standard supporting documents. And those documents are the ones that get in the hands of teachers, that guide lesson plans and activities, and need to be told to students. So that's the substance of the standards, and I don't want that substance lost. I certainly don't. And I'll check. Dr. Silver can help me remember this next week, and talk with Dr. Carlin. Lori Carlin, and find out what particular episodes in history related to the American Indian culture will be in the supporting documents. The supporting documents are the resources that finally make it in the hands of teachers. See, something I thought of last night, and I've jotted a note to myself to even check on this. What you're sharing and what I'm about to share with you, Cameo, they can't become part of the standards. The standards capture that, but that material, those stories, those narratives, those heartfelt, long ago, hopefully to end, show up in the supporting sense. The story that I want to make sure is somewhere in the supporting documents
I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. It's good seeing your name again on the list, Cameo.
Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Artsinine.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. So, of course, we still have lots of work to do to our SACE members, and maybe we can look at some of that when we're discussing our recommendations today that will go into our SACE report. So if you can click on the link that's included in the agenda to access those, our working document. So for our SACE report, we do have to come up with recommendations for the content. We have to have a theme for our report, and then we would generate our recommendations. And one of our recommendations could be to ensure that feedback is received from SACE as part of DPI's revision process. We certainly want to address that and have a voice in that process. So looking at the working document, we do have a recommendation for the content of report to include 3-year trend data for Ms. Richardson. Based on discussions today, we could also possibly use some of the information from Dr. Maynard's pilot, if everyone agrees with that. Any input, recommendations, suggestions? Is everyone fine with focusing on Dr. Maynard's report for our SACE report? Since we do not have 2019-2020 performance data, maybe focusing on Dr. Maynard's recommendations for her report. For our SACE report, our SACE report is disseminated widely across the North Carolina, so many people in leadership will see this and can use this to initiate discussions throughout the state.
This is Dorothy Yates. I would like to see some of the aspects from the study with Dr. Maynard included in our report.
Thank you, Ms. Dorothy. And throughout that pilot project, we were given a voice at the table as she presented, as well as people from the tribal communities. So the Indian voice is certainly included in that pilot project. Thank you, Ms. Dorothy.
I would also like to see one of the recommendations addressing Stacey being at the table for these curriculum discussions. To ensure that we do have supporting documents that include specifics of our North Carolina American Indian history.
Thank you, Ms. Dorothy. I just added that to our working document. Any other
I also like your topic with the second bullet, the Native resilience, advancing educational equity during a pandemic, because we have had to be resilient. And that comes back through our history with different hardships that we faced, that we've been able to be resilient and to come back with that, to advance that educational equity. So I like that second bullet suggestion.
Thank you, Ms. Dorothy. Any other suggestions, input, feedback?
One more comment. I don't know if we would want to since we're using the word native, but we prefer the American Indian being our reference point to us. If somewhere we need to advance in educational equity for our American Indian students during a pandemic, to somewhere include that definition, American Indian, and not just native.
Madam Chair, when you finish jotting down that note, I want to make a point to follow up on Ms. Yates' point.
You may proceed, Dr. Oxenine.
Yes. What I would suggest that you also do is that you formalize a very brief statement capturing exactly what Ms. Yates just said, and get it to Dr. Silver, and I will make sure that it gets to the social studies section, because that's a point that that concerned me, and it still does, in the revisions, social studies, the revisions that we're going to vote on next week. We need to come to terms, folks, with do we want to see Indigenous people throughout these standards, or do you prefer Native, or do you, Stacey, what is your will on the terminology that needs to show up in the standards? Is it American Indian? Is it Indigenous? Or is it Native? The Stacey needs to be clear on that. or all of the above?
Excuse me, this is Melissa Lee. I'd like to interject on that. Since I'm the president of the Wake County Indian Education Program, we went and did talk to students directly, and to the school board of Wake County School Board, we went and told them that we wanted American Indian to represent it for the November month. So that's what we put into position with them, and so now it's American Indian Heritage Month.
Oh, very good. Something like that, I'd like to see it united point to come before the State Board of Education.
Ma'am, this is Frank Cooper. I'd like to give some input.
Absolutely, Mr. Cooper, you may proceed.
Thank you. I think all three terms should be synonymous and taught because, for example, our new vice president is technically an American Indian, but not exactly the same thing as Native Americans or indigenous people of America. So I think all terminology, even in just one lesson, exactly what they mean and how they're related to the indigenous people of North America, well, North and South America.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. And Ms. Dorothy, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs actually put out a statement saying that it is American Indian, that we recommend using American Indian.
Yes, the commission did put out that statement that the preferred terminology is American Indian.
Thank you.
Also, this is Angela Richardson. I think the term indigenous was also looked upon because it does refer to the indigenous population of our continent and our state, because of just like you just mentioned, even though our vice president is considered American Indian because of her Asian ancestor of the Indians from India, but she's not from the indigenous population. That's why that was, I think, placed in there, and the clarification from the Commission of Indian Affairs was also brought to the attention of the meeting that I was in.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. So today, if we can address recommendations for the report, and then maybe Dr. Silver and I can refine those. We do want to decide on a report theme today, but if anyone else has any suggestions for content recommendations, that would be great. And then we will look at our report themes again and decide on one of those.
Dr. Locklear?
Yes.
Hi, this is Cameo. One thing that Greg, Mr. Richardson touched on was the mascot. And I know that for a long time we've had that in like the back of the report, and it was a recommendation one time, I think back in the 80s and then again in the 90s, but it may be something we want to revisit again, given the state of some of like the national football teams and stuff like that, changing theirs and the baseball team. So it may be something that we revisit.
Absolutely. Thank you for that recommendation. And in the past, that was included each year, an update of those mascots. So right now we have our 3-year trend data, include the data from the pilot project and mascots. Are there any additional themes or recommendations that anyone would like added? Hearing none, we will move forward to our report theme. Anyone is welcome to add any additional report themes, or we can decide on one of these. If anyone has any titles they would like to add, last year's theme was 2020 Vision for Culturally Responsive Classrooms Through Tribal Consultation, Our Land, Our Stories, Our Future. And then these are just 3 proposed report themes that I drafted here, but I'm welcome to hear additional suggestions or to craft any of these. Miss Dorothy, like the second one, and I did craft it, revise it, Miss Dorothy, to say resilience, advance in educational equity for our American Indian students during a pandemic.
This is Rhea Jacobs. I agree. I like using the second bullet point too, the second theme suggestion.
Thank you, Ms. Rhea.
This is LaRonda. I agree. I like the second one as well.
Thank you.
This is Cameo. I like the second one as well.
Okay, so we will vote on that during our action items later on. Now we can move forward to our 2021 report recommendations.
Excuse me, going back to that second bullet, wasn't there something before resilience?
Native resilience. Do you want me to put it back?
I feel like we need something before it, but I'm not sure.
If we could do American Indian resilience, advancing educational equity for our students during a pandemic.
This is Melissa Lee. I like that idea of American Indian.
This is Frank Cooper.
You may proceed, Mr. Cooper.
I don't Indian, but it's not at the forefront for me because it causes too much confusion to people who don't know the difference between Indians and American Indians. And at a school like Hope County High School, where you have military influence and people from all over the world and Latin America and everywhere else, that is confusing to say Indian. But, you know.
Dr. Locklear, this is Cameo.
You may proceed.
I would say that we stick with the American Indian because all of our governing documents, as far as like, you know, when you go to the hospital, all the forms and stuff, that's what they have on them. Just to keep the fluency between each document and entity and following with what the Commission of Indian Affairs suggests.
Thank you, Cameo. So we like the second one that's typed in better, American Indian resilience, advancing educational equity for our students during a pandemic.
This is Margot from Hereford County area, Eastern North Carolina. Can we put in parentheses indigenous people right behind American Indian so there's no confusion?
I think we just need to be one. I think it's confusing to add the second term.
This is Rodney Jackson with Cumberland County Schools. On the 506 form that students fill out, it says American Indians. And also on the U.S. Census, it said American Indians.
Yeah, I think that consistency is important. And I see Dr. Oxendine has a chat that says consistency. Yes, the consistency is definitely important in our SACE report. So do we all like the edits to the revision here? Before proceeding, is everyone fine with this? And we'll vote later.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. I'm okay with that. American Indian Resilience. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, now we are going to move forward with our 2021 recommendations.
Madam Chair, this is Olivia. I do have a quick question before I leave the meeting. Some clarity around, I think I heard you say a few minutes ago something about 3-year trend data is going to, I think that's going to replace the annual data that we've always had in the report. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Richardson just proposed that we look at three-year trend data. We will have some data from this past school year, but we won't have all the data that we're used to, that we're accustomed to adding in our SACE report.
All right, so the 3-year trend data will look at 3, 8. Will the 3-year trend data capture what we've always had in the report, but it will be 3-year rather than annual? Is that correct?
Yes, I'm going to discuss that further with Dr. Silver, but that's what I'm envisioning.
I think that's good. I think it'll be really good because I think it's always good for the state board to look at trends, and that way someone, hopefully more than someone on the board, will say, wow, not much progress, or this is good progress. The trend data is always an eye-opener, so I think that's a good direction.
Thank you. And that data is so important. I mean, because every year, or when I just did the presentation about our SACE report, we are still behind our white counterparts in all testing areas and our dropout rates. So that data is certainly important.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to be leaving, and proud of all that you do. SACE, you're important in the education of our kids. And thank you, Madam Chair, for the time that you give to this work, and to Dr. Silver. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, you too. Thanks for joining us today. All right, we will proceed to look at our 2021 report recommendations. So we do have some notes here about a recommendation around SACE being a part of our standards adoption, and a recommendation around equity in the pandemic, which aligns with DPI's new equity resolution that has been made. And I've added some notes here. These are the past, I have the 2020 recommendations, the ones from last year. There are also following, I have the North Carolina Public School Forum, the top 10. This is their top 10 areas that they focus on. And then at the bottom, I have part of Donna Maynard's Comprehensive Center Network report that we may be able to pull some recommendations from. And so what Donna Maynard did here was she kind of she did look at the annual reports from SACE from 2017 to 2020, and she just gave a bird's eye view of the recommendations that we have. So her recommendations are really aligned with Stacy's past recommendations.
Madam Chair, if I may, this is Susan again.
Absolutely.
It would be my suggestion that the council move forward with all new recommendations this year. I know it's been a practice because things take several years to implement to just kind of tweak some of the recommendations that were there, but to leave those standing. And my other recommendation would be today that if the council could agree around large terms, and then I'm happy to work with Madam Chair to really wordsmith those and then send them back to you for suggestion recommendations. So for example, you have 2 large recommendations right now. Well, actually 3, because Cameo brought up one earlier. So one around this idea of Stacy having an internalized formal place within standards adoption, and also development of curriculum tools. Then you have one around equity, which we could also tie in with access to high-speed internet, because that's been a major barrier. And then Cameo also mentioned bringing mascots back to the forefront. So you could agree around, I would say, 4, maybe 5 big themes, and then give us an opportunity to support you in really building those out and bringing those back to the council.
Thank you, Dr. Silver. I'm happy to collaborate with you if we can decide on some big ideas today. So we do have the 4 as we stand. Are there any others that we definitely want to see in our recommendations for 2021? I definitely think that we should keep our culturally responsive, the focus on our culturally responsive module, as we have updated that, and DPI could utilize that as well as the teachers in North Carolina. So I would like to keep that recommendation or revise it in some way. And I do think there needs to be a focus on our modules.
I agree.
And Madam Chair, Susan, again, just something else to also think about is, do you want something, as a council, want something around Stacy having some involvement, representation within the work that's done within the Office of Equity or the Deputy Superintendent of Equity? Because the 90-day plan that's going to come out of Dr. Maynard's pilot, one of the action steps there is to raise with the superintendent the addition of a staff member specifically devoted to American Indian issues. So if your report is kind of saying, maybe not directly hire somebody, but it's saying we need representation there, and then you also have this 90-day plan that's specifically saying hire an American Indian, those 2 things come together. You now have 2 things on record that support that.
I agree with that also.
Me too. Are there any other report recommendations?
Madam Chair, in addition to these recommendations, the recommendations will also be in the report from the national study. Is that correct?
Yes. You're saying, are we going to include the data from the pilot project, from Dr. Maynard's pilot project?
Right.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That'll be part of the content, report content.
Okay.
Any others?
Dr. Locklear, this is Cameo. I was looking at, as I'm looking at our recommendations, I think maybe we could take like culturally responsive modules and put mascots like a bullet point underneath that so we can combine some of these recommendations. So, because the culturally responsiveness can encompass mascots and the equity in the pandemic can encompass broadband access. If, you know, I was just trying to see how we could kind of streamline some of our recommendations and not leave any of it out, but include it in the overall recommendation.
Thank you for that input. Yes, Dr. Silver and I will keep that in mind as we are crafting the recommendations. And we'll share those with you guys for a vote. Thank you for sharing your ideas today. Your voice is very important. This work is important and it's much needed, especially based on the conversations of today. And our attendance and our advocacy in these meetings are also significant. So your voice is important as we proceed and support educational efforts and high expectations for American Indian students. It's important that they receive rigorous educational experiences. All right, now we will move forward on the action items for today. So our first action item is our SACE report title. So if someone would like to make a motion.
This is Rhea Jacobs. I make a motion that the SACE report title for 2021 to be used as American Indian Resilience, Advancing Educational Equity for Our Students During a Pandemic.
This is Melissa Lee. I second it.
So those in favor can say, do we have any opposed?
Madam Chair, you've got a first and a second for that motion. Do you want me to proceed with a roll call vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. Margo Taggart, leave us. Camille Lanning?
Yay.
Thank you. Melissa Lee? Melissa Lee, if you can just unmute and give your vote.
Yay.
Thank you. Frank Cooper?
No.
Alicia's not here. Rhea Jacobs?
Yes.
Angela Richardson?
Yes.
Will Paul?
Yes.
Dorothy Crowe? Dorothy Yates?
Yes.
Dr. Tiffany Locklear?
Yes.
And Dr. LaRonda Lowry?
Yes.
You have 8 yeas and 1 nay, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So we can carry that forward. Next, we need to is it, we need to decide if it's okay if Dr. Silver and I work on recommendations and then send those out for a formal vote.
So perhaps, Madam Chair, if we could get a motion to approve those 5 large themes that were proposed in agreement for Madam Chair and Liaison to go forward to wordsmith those and then send those out for further review. I think that's what we're looking for.
I, Melissa Lee, make motion to do all that.
This is LaRonda. I second.
Okay, Madam Chair, you've got a motion on the floor and seconded that the council approve the 6 large themes and that Madam Chair and Liaison work together to wordsmith those and then send them out to the council for review. Would you like for me to engage in a roll call vote?
Please, thank you.
Camille Lanning?
Yay.
Melissa Lee?
Yay.
Frank Cooper?
Yes.
Rhea Jacobs?
Yes.
Angela Richardson?
Yes.
Will Paul?
Yes.
Ms. Yates? Ms. Dorothy Yates?
Yes.
Dr. Susan Locklear?
Yes.
Dr. LaRonda Lowry?
Yes.
It's unanimous, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And we have one more action item, that a Google link be developed by SACE so that we can monitor regular feedback on our SACE modules.
Pardon me, Madam Chair. I apologize greatly. I have been leaving Mr. Rodney Jackson off of the roll call vote. I apologize. I know it's already carried, but just for the sake of the record, I want to go back and just have him verbally give his vote on the first one, which was around the theme. So, Mr. Jackson, I do apologize. So the first one around the recommendation that the theme be approved, are you yay or nay on that one?
First of all, my heart is hurting that you let me off, but that's okay. I'll get over it. And yes, my vote's yes.
Okay, and on the second that was raised, which was to approve the broad 5 bullets that were put forward, and then for us to go through and wordsmith those, you yay or nay on that one?
Again, heartbroken, but yes.
Thank you. I'll beg forgiveness later. I'll send some over. All right, Madam Chair, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. So our next action item is to have a Google link developed by SACE so that we could monitor the feedback of our modules on a regular basis.
This is Dorothy Yates. I so move.
This is LaRonda. I second.
Okay, I'm sure you've got a motion on the floor and it's been seconded that the survey be updated within the module. Do you want me to proceed with the roll call vote?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, here we go one more time, folks. Camille Lanning?
Yay.
Melissa Lee?
Yay.
Frank Cooper?
Yes.
Rhea Jacobs?
Yes.
Angela Richardson?
Yes.
Will Paul?
Yes.
Dorothy Yates?
Yes.
Dr. Susan Locklear?
Yes.
Dr. Tiffany?
Yes.
Dr.
Yes.
LaRonda Lowry?
Yes.
And Mr. Rodney Jackson?
Yes.
Thank you. Your motion is carried, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right. Thank you guys for a productive meeting today. Are there any announcements at this time?
Yes, for our 5 SACY members whose terms will be ending in June 30th of this year, I sent emails out last night. If you did not receive an email with some specific information on that, please let me know, and so we can talk about that. We have not received any applications so far. So for the 3 members whose terms can be renewed, I was asking you to please contact your tribe and let them know that you're interested and get your application sent in. And then for the 2 members who's finishing their 2nd term, if you would please contact your tribal representative and let them know that a SACY representative needs to be recommended. Thank you.
Miss Dorothy, this is Rhea Jacobs. I do have my application and I'm waiting on the superintendent or the principal to sign it and return it. And Miss Brenda at the office is drafting that recommendation, so you should receive it very soon.
Very good. As I stated in the email, we're going to extend that deadline till next Friday to give people an opportunity to get their applications in. If you're going to mail them, we need to receive them by Friday. Or you can email them. There's instructions on the letter that I sent on how to email if you so choose to email your packet. Thank you so much.
And Dr. Locklear, I have an announcement. I'll be adding to my staff Consuela Richardson. She is joining my instructional review coach team as an instructional review coach 1. I'm excited about that because anytime we can expand the pool and diversity within the agency and have another American Indian on staff, that is a wonderful thing. Most of you are familiar with her, and Dr. Briggs and I are looking forward to incorporating her into the safety work, in addition to the diagnostic services work that we do.
Awesome, awesome. Are there any other announcements at this time? All right. Again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for giving us a long virtual Friday. Your voice and your work is important. Thanks for all you do. Do we have a motion to adjourn today?
This is Cameo Lanning, and I make a motion to adjourn.
This is Rhea Jacobs. I second.
Right, you've got a motion and a second and maybe even a third to adjourn. Would you like me to do a roll call vote?
Yes, please.
All right, Cameo Lanning?
Yay.
Connie, she's not here. Melissa Lee?
Yay.
Frank Cooper?
Yes.
Rhea Jacobs?
Yes, ma'am.
Miss Angela Richardson?
Yes.
Mr. Will Paul?
Yes.
Miss Dorothy Yates?
Yes.
Dr. Tiffany Locklear?
Yes.
Dr. LaRonda Lowry? Dr. Lowry? And Mr. Rodney Jackson?
Yes.
Okay. The motion carries, Madam Chair. You all are adjourned.
Thank you. Hope everyone has a great weekend.